Welcome to Watch World with Faye, a new podcast in the watch and lifestyle space. I'm your host, Faye Soteri. I've been in the industry for over 20 years and I've been lucky enough to work with the people behind the brands, from some incredible independents and micro brands to the Goliaths. One thing that I've noticed as a common theme is every brand has its own unique story. Join me in meeting with these people as we bring these stories to life. Welcome to Watch World with Faye. I'm Faye Soteri. I'm joined again with my esteemed friend and colleague, Mark Toulson, and we're just back from Geneva, Watches and Wonders 2025, and it was a brilliant trip. Mark, have you recovered?
Yes, I have. Yeah. I think so. Yeah, but I'm getting on a bit these days. So yeah. But I'm recovered, happy as well.
Yeah, there's a little bit more mileage on us now, isn't there?
Yeah. That's true.
So, I mean, I don't know where to start. I was really excited about this episode. I was so excited to be back in Switzerland. Wasn't really sure if I was going to make it this year, but we went. We conquered. Well, I don't know if we conquered. We certainly saw, but it was an incredible event. Actually, over 55,000 visitors. There were. Gosh, was the statistic that was 12% up on the year before. 6,000 retailers were there represented, and that's 5% on the year up. 1,600 journalists, us included, and that was up 7%. And sort of retail meetings, I think there was over 12,000. The statistics are incredible.
Yeah,
they did a brilliant job of putting on an event. It got bigger yet again. It's such a sophisticated trade fair, and I always sort of smile wryly when we talk about it as a trade fair, because it couldn't be further from the traditional trade fairs that what you're used to in most other industries. And I felt very grateful to be able to go and to be welcomed by so many brands. We had nearly 20 appointments, and I think I had a great time. It was great to be in Switzerland. It was wonderful to see so many friendly faces, so many professionals from both retail side, from brands and brand partners and vendors. And I think for me to just go over the time we spent there, what I'd really like to do is get your opinion and your observations on the temperature of the fair. And then potentially we'll go into some trends, what we saw, what we really liked, what we thought worked. Why don't you start with your observations of the fair this year, and in comparison to perhaps when you were there a year ago?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I echo your sentiments about the sort of the glamour and the sort of prestige and the fact that it is a trade fair. But on the weekend, the last weekend of the fair, it's open to the public, and the public have to pay to get in. And there were 23,000 people who came in over 2 days. And I think that was 21% up over last year. So the civilians, as they were, the people who just got an interest in watches and weren't trade and weren't press, they really flocked to it, to the Palexpo in just outside Geneva by the airport. But also what was going on in central Geneva with lots of brands, or the pirates, as Jean-Frédéric Dufour would call them, the brands in the hotels. And in the boutiques, and the parties that were going on, and the bands playing by the side of Lake Geneva, and basically it is a watch town, is Geneva. I'm sure it's also banking and kind of the world health and all that sort of thing. But it really became a city for watch people for that week. It was incredible, really incredible. And
yeah, you can sense the energy as it feels like the world's press and retailers descend on that one city.
Yeah. And I think that, just again to context some numbers, the Swiss export data for January and February, which is the latest numbers we have, so that's the exports from Switzerland into the world, we're showing a 2.4% decline against last year. So business is tough, luxury is tough. We kind of know that, we recognise that, and it. To your question about what was it like last year, it felt really gloomy in 2024. It felt depressed. I mean, that could have been just me, but I got the vibe that it was generally a bit of a dour affair. And some of the brands said, we're not releasing as many models as we would perhaps like, because we sense that the market can't take it. There's no point in launching something in a bit of a downturn. But I think for 2025, the industry had chosen its mood. They'd chosen to be positive, to be happy, be progressive, and there was loads of stuff. And right up until the point where President Trump's tariff letter message came out, or he got his board out, and the tarifying implications of that for the watch industry. See what I did there? That maybe dampened the mood a little, but everybody was focused on product, I think, most of the time. And the business side of it, which obviously is hugely important if you're a producer or a retailer, I wouldn't say it took a back seat, but again, there was still a reasonably buoyant mood despite that kind of bit of a downer caused by the US.
Yeah, well, nobody knew that was going to happen, but I definitely feel there was a real positive energy about the fair this year. Trends. Let's launch straight into that, because we were there to see some watches, and I think there were some quite defining trends that we saw and themes. For me, inside out, as when we were discussing it sort of on our route, I think I counted 39,000 steps over the sort of 3-4 days I was there, in 6-inch heels, no less. That was me, not you. Yeah. Inside out, I felt the brands were really looking at and working on the mechanisms and the movements of their watches, enhancing, upgrading, evolving. I thought that was a really important statement for everybody. It's still nothing's going away. We're here. We're constantly looking to move forward. We'll go into the detail of these trends, but these were sort of what we saw. Heritage and revival, a huge amount of products and brands that were reaching into their archives or utilizing key pieces from their past and relaunching or reviving something that was really important. And some of them were key for the year because it was anniversary years, or potentially partnerships. Partnerships was another big theme. In terms of aesthetics, stone and natural dials, saw quite a lot of that. I think for the biggest one for me was largely the movement element and the focus on that. What are your thoughts on that and where that went? And did you see anything else that contradicted that, or I've missed off?
No, I'd agree with all of that. I mean, colour was a thing, but you kind of cover that in stone dials, and there's quite a bit of ceramic action going on. One thing I would say is about sizes. Again, we saw them diminishing a little bit last year. And that continued, but again, we'll discuss that. But I mean, in terms of the movements, I think it was, as you said, inside out. It was the movements that were the key theme of the fair, I would suggest, and advancing technology, making watches more accurate with longer power reserves, etc., etc. So I mean, we can dive into that if you like.
Was that a nod to what is one of my favorite watches? But yeah, let's please dive into that.
Well, I mean, we can start there if you like. Yeah, I mean, I suppose so. Ulysse Nardin, and I'm wearing one because this is one of my favorite watches, and I've had it a really long time. This is a diver, and I didn't realise that collection started in 1964, which is when I started living in 1964. So the watch is as old as me, just over 60 years old or whatever, 61 years old. And they had a series of iterations of that watch through the ages. And it's kind of culminating in what they call the Air, the Diver Air, which they presented it as the world's lightest mechanical dive watch, and it was 52 grams. And this watch I'm wearing is about 132 grams, and I have a Rolex GMT, a very old one, and that's probably about 112 grams. So it's so light, and when you put it on, well, you knew you were wearing a watch, but it was really special. So they've skeletonized the watch. Really, there's no dial. It's 200 meters water resistant, so they haven't made any concessions to the performance of a dive watch in pursuit of the kind of holy grail of making it light. But it's 90 hours power reserve, and 80% of what is inside the case is air, is Swiss air, so it's expensive, but it's just air. And so I don't know how long it took them to kind of pare everything away and make such an incredible movement, but it looks spectacular. The case is made of recycled titanium and carbon fiber. The strap is like a nylon NATO thing made from plastic recovered from the sea, so it's got a bit of eco credibility about it, and it also can withstand. I think they said 5,000 G. Now, to put that in some sort of context, they had a punch, like at fairgrounds where you have a punching ball, and it tells you what the punch you've done is. And people were punching it, so there was great theatre on that stand, and probably the best cappuccino in Geneva as well, but that's a whole other story. But that people were punching it and doing something like 120 G on the punching machine. So this is 5,000. So, I mean, it was just incredible. You loved it, didn't you? I think.
Yeah, it was the Standout watch. What they had done, and it took I think it was 6 years in the making. There wasn't anything that I disliked about it. It wasn't actually. Conversely, it was a spectacular piece. I had to double check myself, was it because of the marketing of it? Because Mathieu Haviland was very clever in that. If you think about how expensive these fairs are to put on, and goodness only knows what the brand's contributions are, but it is the platform for brands to showcase their biggest, their best product of the year and what's been in development for a long period of time. So it's when you've got the world's press there and the world's retailers, you really want that opportunity to capture everybody's attention. They had one watch this year, so they could have launched several other pieces to support a wider collection. It was a specific choice to have one watch at the fair.
Yeah.
And it's not a limited edition. It's core piece, so it's going to be it will be readily available. It touches all of the important elements for the brand, so it's loyal to their diver element and that heritage. They're big on sustainability, and they're constantly pushing those boundaries. And as you said, you were talking us through the importance of the movement and it being 80% air. When the press release came through before we left, I wasn't entirely sure. I thought it was a potentially, a bit of a gimmick, because we're used to seeing the first, the best, the slimmest, the most complicated. Brands always issue a hero piece as part of their collections at the fairs. I think what Ulysse Nardin did this year was they delivered a superhero. I loved it from the execution of the watch itself to the marketing element. They had a podcast studio. I was lucky enough to have an interview with Mathieu, and we'll be releasing that. It was really wonderful to get some of his time, and you could see the fun that they had and the enjoyment, and the team are wonderful. We've worked with from them on both sides of the pond, and they were exhausted. And I remember saying to one of them, "Why are you tired? You've already got one watch." But the intensity of it and the fair, because it had all the spectacle to it and the credibility. I was really excited for them, and I was really pleased to be able to get to see it and have the time with Mathieu and look at the fair. And he's an incredible man. He's a really smart man.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided 4 months before the fair to change the whole stand and the whole booth. So what tends to be about a year in preparation. And by his own admission, he's like, I didn't think it could be done, but we did it anyway. He's really forward thinking. And it was joyous. For me, it was one of the reasons that I love the industry and love watches, and absolute kudos for delivering one watch. It was the talk of the fair. Yeah. And they were surprised by the absolute enthusiasm from everybody. They knew they had a great watch and a great product, but from all the touch points. So yeah, I'm going in. I'm launching in with that was one of my favorite watch of the fair. A couple of other standout pieces, but absolute congratulations to Ulysse Nardin for that and the entire team. So I mean, within the movements. There obviously the other standout pieces or piece was the movement for the Rolex Land Dweller, because that was really important. Can you give us a bit of a talk us through that, and also why it's important to Rolex as well?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, there's always leaks these days, isn't there? And so we got to see what was trailed as the Rolex new lines a couple of days before Rolex started doing their usual oblique teasers, which you try to piece together what it is, because there's like weird shots of what the new lines are going to be. But we had this inclination that they were going to produce something called the Land Dweller, because they'd registered that name. And a couple of months back, they'd patented a new type of escapement. So that was also a clue. But anyway, so I mean, we'll talk about the aesthetics of the watch later, but just to concentrate on the movement, because we're kind of on that movement section. So the movement is called 7135, and it's incredible. 32 payments, 66 hours power reserve, and crucially, this is the anorak thing. It's a 5 hertz movement, so that means that basically the watch operates at 36,000 vibrations per hour. And if you think about what that looks like in a second, the second hand moves 10 times in a second. So that second hand really sweeps round the dial, like it does an automatics, but it's a bit of an oxymoron to say, well, it's really fast, because obviously a second is a second, but what the hand is doing in that second is pretty damned incredible. Why did they do this? I think it's a great movement development. They developed a new escapement, and an escapement is the part of the movement that it kind of counts and maintains the oscillations of the balance wheel, which is crucial to the timekeeping and stability of timekeeping. And they called this escapement the Dynapulse. And it is kind of I mean, I'm not a watchmaker, so I can well comfortably be challenged on this by anybody who knows more than me, which is probably quite a few people. But it's kind of a cross between a natural escapement and the Swiss lever escapement, which appears in most Swiss automatic watches or mechanical watches. So it's called Dynapulse, and it has 2 escape wheels. And on the trailers that we saw, you saw this mechanism working away, and it did look like science fiction. It looked like the thing had come from outer space, and it's incredible. So you still get the plus or minus 2 seconds a day, which is kind of Rolex standard. But I don't know whether you want to talk about meeting several blokes in Geneva who got a glass in the hand. You want to talk about that, Faye?
Met man in a pub. Yeah, I'll come on to that.
Met a man in a pub. But essentially, essentially, that plus or minus 2 seconds, it can depend, or well, it will depend on the wearer. You know, if you sit on your backside all day like I do these days, an automatic watch isn't going to tell the same time as if you're running about all the time. It's not going to maintain the scrupulous kind of accuracy on everybody. The idea of this movement is it's more democratic and it's more resistant to user interference, so we'll maintain that plus or minus 2 seconds a day over a longer period of time for a greater number of people. At least I think that's how the guys explained it that we met in the pub, kind of thing.
Well, first, love a watch story that starts with "I met a man in a pub."
Yeah.
That was fascinating to me, because we were at another watch event, and the gentleman, it was a sort of after, it was in the city at a boutique, and we were chatting, and a gentleman came over to us and asked me about my watch. He was very complimentary about it. And then when you get talking as to what do you do, in what capacity are you here at the watch fair? Oh, I'm an engineer for Rolex. I'm a watch. And like, oh, okay. And he, and he was at a watch event for another brand that did do something very incredible. We might have mentioned it already, but there were him and two of his colleagues, and that's another reason why I love the fair. It's just there is a commonality why people are there. It is primarily watches and jewelry. However, just the mix of people that you meet, and he was the one that was explaining that. You've delivered it much more eloquently than I ever could. But what they've done is they've safeguarded their future. And Rolex, I love that, because no one ever assumes that they need to do that. They already are the crown. Their position in the watch world is, well, it doesn't even need to be referenced. They are so important. And what they've done with the Land Dweller is they've sort of future-proofed it and given another model for people to buy into. Because I think the last collection, the last movement collection they launched was the Sky Dweller. I think 2012 that came out. And I suppose there was some movement. There's some movement on the 1908 when they brought out.
Yeah.
That was a new model, but they haven't really done.
130, I think, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, they haven't done too much. And what we've seen they launched it in the yellow, rose, and platinum model. Interestingly, in the white roller saw, which I did think was a little bit odd and jars with me a little bit, only because previously if they're launching anything new, it's always in the precious metal to start with, and then follows with the roller saw pieces, and then steel if they're going to do it in that. So I found it quite odd and peculiar that they would just have one pillar where it was the steel and white gold, to give access to people that can't buy into the precious metal. It just, in my opinion, which nobody's asked for, it was just unusual in terms of how they usually launch products. 36 millimeters and 40 millimeters. The bracelet was lovely. I know you're going to talk a little bit about that. It wore really nicely on the wrist, and I think it's a beautiful third pillar to the date just models and the day dates. It sort of sits between them. I said to somebody at Rolex, I think it straddles the collection really well, and I wasn't received very well with that expression, but if I think about it, it's a welcomed third pillar to their date just to their core collection. They don't call them core, I suppose, but it was a real, took my hat off to them, because they didn't need to create a whole new collection. And one of the things we were talking about is heritage and revival. It was very close, because talking about all the leaks that we saw on the internet before, we had calls going, looks like they're bringing out the oyster quartz again. That was a model from the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, well, really, a Rolex going into quartz doesn't feel right. But that's what they've done. They've taken the aesthetic of that model, enhanced the movement with the technology that you've just spoken about, and voila, Land Dweller.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you asked me what was the implications, and you sort of explained how you think what it implies for the brand. It took them 7 years to do this, because it is a new escapement, and it just evolves automatic wristwatches to the next level. And that's the thing. We think of Rolex as always evolving. They're a conservative brand in so many ways. I mean, I know they do some bonkers things with, gems and leopard skin straps and all that sort of thing in the past. But at the heart, they are useful tool watches that are robust. And for them to come out with what is a revolutionary movement, even though it took them 7 years, so it's not really a 7-year revolution, but when you first see it for the first time, I mean, it was the talk of the fair. And I mean, one of the things I often say, rather jokingly, in the watch industry, what a time to be alive. But I really mean it this time. What a time to be alive and be at the fair to see something new, not only for Rolex, but for the industry. And again, I'm not over-egging my enthusiasm for this, but it's one to tell the kids and the grandkids. You were there in 2025 at Watches and Wonders when Rolex did this thing. I think it was that significant.
And you met the watchmakers that were heavily involved.
Yeah.
That's
It was
not
incredible.
many people get to experience that. So it was, it was certainly one for the books. Grand Seiko, they were another one that were, again, working on their movement. They're already known for it.
Mm-hmm.
It was and what they did was they worked on the smaller case sizes as well, so about 38 millimeter.
Yeah.
So, we're looking at that slightly more generic. No one's classing it as gents or ladies, so they're also working on the movements to fit smaller case sizes as well.
Yeah. I mean, that was it was an evolution of the very fine adjustment watches that they did in I think it was the late 60s. So that now they have a spring drive, so that's a combination of quartz and automatic, and it's called ultra fine accuracy. And it's a 9R B2 movement with a 72-hour power reserve, and they age the quartz crystals in there because it makes them more stable. They seal the circuit and the oscillator in a kind of package, and then lots of quartz watches are thermocompensated. So I know Breitlings are, but as temperature varies, the watch tweaks itself to reflect the changes in temperatures, which would affect timekeeping. Well, this particular the 9RB2 movement, it takes its temperature 540 times a day, I believe, to make sure it's on track with its accuracy, and that makes it plus 20 seconds a year. That's plus 20 seconds a year. I mean, it's an automatic watch regulated by quartz. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Really was.
And their pricing's very conservative as well, so that gives them the opportunity to reach a wider audience, and I think that's really important if you're interested in watches and horology. So as long as Grand Seiko can maintain that approach, it should work. And there were some beautiful dials, lovely dials on that watch as well.
Yeah, Ice Forest, I think. I mean, all their dials are pretty spectacular. I think it's called Ice Forest, and it's about 9,950, I think, so just under 10 grand, which 10 grand is not something to be sneezed at, but considering all that was going on inside it, pretty incredible.
And the Patek on the 5238.
Yeah, so that was an 8-day power reserve and an instantaneous date change. So any Patek movement that's new is always something worth celebrating, something worth talking about. So they did that. It was a very attractive looking watch in white gold with a kind of blue degraded dial. Lovely, absolutely lovely.
And in terms of movements, were there any other pieces any other brands or pieces that were launched that you felt really fell into that, where brands had focused on the movement, the inside out theme that we're coining it for the year?
Well, taking the fall into thing a bit literally, we did see the Jacob Astronomia 4-axis tourbillon, which you could fall into. I mean, it's quite a big watch because there's a lot going on, but it's the world's first 4-axis tourbillon, and it kind of blows your mind when you look at it. So that was pretty significant. And then Beauvais had done something with the Recital 30 World Timer, which I think is the only watch that adjusts for half time zones. So I think New Delhi's on a 30-minute variance, and also does daylight saving time as well. Because the US
they claim they've solved the problem.
Yeah, there's a problem.
That was how it was introduced to us, and I was like, well, that's quite a. I didn't know it was a problem for a start, but when you sort of talk through the challenges of it, and it only needs to be set once. That man is a genius, Mr. Raffi. How he thinks about the movements and the design and what he wants out of them, how to perform, and the functionality.
Yeah.
And nothing is overlooked. I'm going to do a whole episode. We're going to go to Switzerland and meet with them because they're an incredible brand, but to solve the problem of daylight saving, again, as you said, that was, what a time to be alive, because that's the thought of one man. It can't be overlooked, and it shouldn't be dismissed either. They're a very different brand, and they don't showcase at the fair. We saw them down on the lake, and they were incredibly welcoming, lovely people, and very humble. So I know they're much more in the art. They play really well in the artisan space and the if you want pieces bespoke.
Mm-hmm.
However, the pieces that are made for their core collection, which I use very loosely, even then, just the design element, I always come away with my mind blown.
Yeah. I mean, they were incredible, and well, I mean, just one final thing from me on movements, which is taking it back to something that's sort of reasonably simple, was we saw Breitling, the new Top Time B31 is I think he's out in the stores now, and that's in-house caliber B series movement. So the B01 is the chronograph. This is the first non-chrono in-house B series movement. It's it's a 3-hand date model. It's got a free sprung balance, so you alter the regulate the balance by screws on the balance wheel. 78 hours power reserve, 10 bar water resistant, 38mm case. They looked fantastic, and they're like $4,500, which again I know is a lot of money in some ways, but considering what you're getting, they were a really attractive watch. Oh, it also got a Cyclops on the above the date, hasn't it? Can't think who else does that. Yeah, but it looked really cool.
It still looked great. I just
cool.
I don't think you can take it away from them just because they've done something somebody else has done. I mean, this is why we kind of get so excited by it, because one seems to think there's only so many things you can do to a watch, but it does seem there are a lot of things you can do to a watch. So if they're adding a Cyclops on it and somebody else has already got ownership over that, then, and the watch itself, and in this case it was the Breitling, looked great and it wore really nicely. I loved that piece. Why not? If it enhances the watch, it's not taking a branding and slapping it on and sort of taking ownership of that. The Georges Favre-Jacques, which was the Zenith anniversary piece as well, they've gone back. They've done a revival of one of those from that model as well. That was a limited edition piece, but again, going back to both the revival and the movement element. So they've done a lovely job. And they only launched a few pieces, I think, because it's the 160th anniversary this year. That for me actually was another trend. You did actually note on that earlier on about less watches being launched. I loved that because often we're bamboozled. A huge amount of pieces that come out in different dial options, bracelet option, dial option, configurations thereof. And I liked the fact that most of the brands were quite concise this year. It could have been to the point of it being slightly more conservative. It could also be that that's the direction and the strategy, so they can have drops throughout the year, which we have started to see in more recent years. And I wonder if that's the strategy, just to keep the engagement with clients and watch enthusiasts, retailers as well, instead of gone are the days where it's just there's one launch at the beginning of the year, or when there were 2 fairs and then that was it. We are seeing a bit more. So I wonder if they're doing the key launches. But I really like that most brands kept it quite refined. It felt much more sophisticated. And even a brand like Tag, again, slightly different year for them because it was a big celebration, and what they focused on, they kept it quite focused. But often, we see an abundance of watches, and you do get watch blind. Rolex their SKU count this year was 60. And often they're in triple digits, sort of several hundreds, because of the amount of permutations that come with it. So I thought it was lovely. Still couldn't get to see everything, everywhere, but I liked the conservative approach, and I think it probably adds a bit more credibility and a bit more weight to the launches, because you'll remember the times when we'd be someone saying, "Oh, and this is the best watch." Like, what, the best watch since you showed us 2 minutes ago? It's it gives them, it gives the brands and the new products space to breathe, and I think that's really important. So that was like the biggest theme, and I know it was quite important for us and what we chatted about loads. Dials, natural color dials, stone dials, mother of pearl dials. Saw quite a lot of that.
Yeah, we did. I mean, you mentioned Zenith. I mean, everything was blue because it's their corporate color and it's their 160th anniversary. So you had the 135 movement that you mentioned. There's a Pilot in blue ceramic, Defy in blue, Chronomaster in blue, wearing blue. I mean, what's not to like about blue? There was the Chapek and Antarctique Glacier Blue Tourbillon, which I thought was glorious. I thought it was a lovely blue. Doxa at the other end of the scale. They're known for all the colours of the rainbow virtually, but they brought out the 250T GMT in their usual colours: yellow, aquamarine, black, orange, blue, a rainbow of colours. Perhaps the one, and you seem to like this lot were the H. Moser Endeavour Pop collections.
Oh, they were incredible.
Yeah.
They were incredible. They were fun. I love that brand. They're fun. They're interesting. They're credible. Their marketing. They're great people. The watches. I think they're a really special brand, and it's one of those that I feel quite privileged when we're able to see them. And if you're able to buy one, and two, if you're a stockist as well, because they're very selective over it, and rightly so. But it's small production, so they're not mass market or high volumes, but never fails to. It's a combination of being impressed with what they're doing as a horological brand and still make you smile at the same time. They don't take it too seriously, but they're certainly not dismissive of what they do. And I think that's a really wonderful machination of a watch brand in particularly that price point.
Yeah. I mean, you've got coral orange, turquoise, Burmese jade, pink opal, lemon chrysoprase, lapis, etc. It was a glorious.
Did they have, from memory, they had both the coral dials and the mother of pearl on the subsections?
Yeah, well, it depended. I mean, they were flipped over. You got one that was predominantly coral orange and a small bit of turquoise, maybe the sub-seconds or a chapter ring, and then you'd kind of got the reverse. One that was most of the turquoise with a little bit of coral orange on it. Was it about 18 variations? I think they had. There was a tourbillon. There were just some normal time only, and I think there was a minute repeater as well. So they kind of covered the complications, but fundamentally, it was the colours. It was the colours that were the main thing.
Really fresh, weren't they?
Yeah.
And again, I think the case size. Were they 39 or 40?
They're of that. Yeah. They're not big watches.
It wasn't a big watch, and because of the color palette, it was gender neutral, which we're seeing quite a lot of. Not that a dark dial means it's masculine or a white dial is feminine or anything along those lines, but they were very pastel, pastel-esque, fun, fresh. It was we didn't actually have an appointment, but they were able to see us. So I was grateful for that, and it was lots of fun.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about the Tag Formula Ones now, but I know that was probably part of the retro thing. So there's a bit of a
absolutely. It's a big year for them. Well, the news broke last year, didn't it? They're now the official timekeepers of Formula One.
Mm-hmm.
So the timing of the launch of the new collection as well. So yeah, please launch in.
Well, in 1986, when TAG Techniques Avant-Garde bought Heuer and became TAG Heuer, the first watch they produced was a kind of polyurethane-y, plasticky strap watch called the Formula One in like a multitude of colours: red, green, yellow, black, vivid green, orange, all sorts of different colours. I think they celebrated the return of their timing to Formula One by reintroducing that collection in a 38mm case. I think it was 35 when it came out. And I think it's 1550 on the strap, and there's nine different colours or options. I think there's a couple on a bracelet. But I mean, it's funny because that is relevant to the heritage bit. But I don't think I was working in 1986, but I wasn't far away from working, and I remember that we used to sell shed loads of the Formula One in that iteration of 35mm. And they were £92.50. I probably shouldn't be saying this. They were £92.50, and then had a price increase to £99, and then they went to £125, and we thought it was game over, but it still sold like mad. And this at £15.50, I know it's a lot dearer, but it's got the solargraph movement.
Solargraph movement, yeah.
Yep. And I think, was it sort of like 2 minutes will power the watch for 24 hours or something? 2 minutes of sunlight will power the watch for 24 hours. And when it's fully charged, it can go for like 5 months without seeing daylight. Something like that. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. So if you're thinking about that, the fact is, I mean, a pint of milk isn't what it cost in 1986 either. But so I appreciate the appreciation of the prices, but they're still sub £2,000. And aesthetically, they're very similar. They've been very loyal to the
Yeah.
86 model.
Yeah.
Everything from the bracelet and the straps and how it was written on there, and the loom on it was excellent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they've not just reached back and done a re-edition. They've done it in full tag style.
Yeah.
Where and at that price point, I think it's a great watch, and it's going to work. You know, from the fact that they are the official timekeepers now, they are going to be plastered everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's accessible.
Yeah. You almost wonder. Well, I don't know. Would they have done it if Swatch hadn't done the Moon Swatch? Because it kind of it's in a similar theme. I don't know. Maybe that's a question that doesn't really require an answer. But I did kind of wonder.
Pricing is massively different still, isn't it? You know, one's sub £500, the other one's nearly 2,000.
Yeah, but the concept.
But I understand. I suppose it's that the lower the entry price point.
Mm-hmm.
Formula One's always been one of their biggest collections anyway. But I think everything that you've just spoken about with the solargraph movement, because it just is going to appeal. It's going to appeal to the masses, those that remember the first one, nearly 40 years ago, and those that are just either it's like buying your first watch or buying into several. There's nothing wrong with it, if that makes sense. They've ticked all the boxes, but just done it with tag style.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean they really have. I think one of the other interesting dials, what you mentioned briefly, was the Rolex GMT with the Tiger Iron dial, a combination of red jasper, hematite, and golden brown tiger's eye. That looked pretty cool. And again, I don't know whether you want to get into this now, but the Chopard stuff that you really loved.
Yeah, I was really taken by that. I was really taken by because they showcased the original pieces, some vintage models, and it was primarily ladies.
Mm-hmm.
It was all ladies, and they haven't done re-editions of those versions, but they've taken inspiration from them, and I really like that. And as we are moving into a era and a space where watches are becoming slightly smaller case size and people are moving away from it being gender specific, these were ladies' watches, and they were beautifully done. The vintage pieces that they've got, one of them actually, there was a cuff. It was a white gold cuff with it was a turquoise stone, and it was absolutely beautiful. Their entire stand was decorated with vintage pieces, and I think there's going to be an exhibition later in the year. Really hoping I'm going to be able to speak to somebody about that, because it would just be great to try them on from a really selfish perspective. Jewelry and jewelry watches are a big part of Chopard's story, and I liked where their launches were in that segment. So that's another appointment where they have a lot of different pillars that are very relevant to them as a brand and their story. And therefore, sometimes the launches can seem quite a lot, because you're either doing, you've got the Alpine Eagle, you've got the Luke, you've got the jewelry pieces, you've got the Happy Sport, you've got the Happy Diamond. I always come away massively overstimulated. So to see that, and whether they just kept it refined, because our appointment was slightly shorter this year, and that was what we saw, but their stand wouldn't have been decorated, or their booth wouldn't have been decorated with those pieces if it wasn't relevant. But they therefore had all the ladies' current versions, very beautiful timepieces, feminine, elegant, some of them heavily jeweled, but all in line with, I suppose, their heritage. And there's another one actually, part of the I suppose the revival element. 1980 they did the Samurits, and this year they brought out the Alpine Eagle, and if you put them side by side, it was a definite, it's a re-edition. It's, whether they say it was inspired by, they're very similar watches, smaller case size, exactly aesthetically, the steel and the yellow gold. But they've got, it's, because the Alpine Eagle is a new collection, so perhaps they've rebranded it under that. But again, they've reached into their archives and launched something that was important to them, and that's a sort of sub collection that's growing quite a lot. But yeah, Chopard was really elegant. I very much enjoyed meeting them this year, and we were given a talk through all of the products. Actually, what was the metal material, on the, was it ceramic?
Ceramized titanium.
Okay.
Yeah, so Faye, actually, I mean, the Alpine Eagle's been out a couple of years, but what we were, I think what we were talking about with, we were privileged to have Karl Fritz Schäufele join our meeting. So he's the son of Karl Friedrich Schäufele, who's currently co-president with his sister Caroline. And Karl Fritz was saying about how his dad had to convince his father, so Karl Fritz's grandfather, to make a sports watch, a kind of sports watch that became the St. Moritz. And that took some convincing, but obviously it sort of worked. And then that collection, St. Moritz collection, lapsed. And then I can't remember, the Alpine Eagle came out maybe 3 years ago. But I think it was Karl Fritz who then convinced his dad to come back to revisit the St. Moritz collection and create the Alpine Eagle. So you've got kind of 3 generations of people who are running Chopard, convincing their respective parents to do something with either the St. Moritz or the Alpine Eagle as it is now, which actually it's really charming because it's a family business, and you've got that legacy of talking to your dad about, can we do this? Whereas I mean, a lot of companies do some fantastic watches, but they're not family owned, which is completely fine. But it's just an interesting take on how Chopard operates. And he was a really smart cookie, that Karl Fritz. So I think you can safely say that Chopard's not going to be in the hands of a maniac. He knows what he's doing. I mean, great.
Do we say that about any brands?
Yeah. Well, I could do, but probably not on here. But yes, yeah.
No, that's
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just sort of tying up the heritage piece. That was obviously, we spoke about Rolex. Cartier, the Guichet, the original, was in 1928.
Yeah.
Almost an exact replica of the piece this year. Patek, the split second, that was again a re-edition. Piaget in the 1970s, they did a black tie, and this year it was the Andy Warhol. And IWC, which was great for them, and that was a partnerships one. It's the smaller cases. IWC actually played into a lot of the different themes that we've covered. So in 1976, the engineer, now they've got the engineer automatic at 35 millimeters.
Yeah,
and they are not sponsoring. They've got a skin in the game as well for the F1 film.
Yeah.
So, and their stand was excellent. They had the car from the set, and at one point they had everybody on set, from the gaffers all the way up to the directors, all wearing engineers.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah.
Partnerships, we saw quite a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think the only ones that I could think of was the Tag Formula One, which you've covered, and the IWC, obviously with the F1 film, and there was the beautiful green dial engineer with gilt dial furniture on it. I think it's going to be called the Sunny. Sunny Hayes is a character in the F1 film. It's like 11,000 quid. That was lovely. Really, really, really nice watch. Really gorgeous.
And they the gold piece as well was lovely. So I don't think, what other key themes did you observe?
Well, size a little bit, because size is everything. I mean, generally moving like we've seen over the last couple of years towards 40 mil or slightly smaller. And you mentioned IWC bringing the engineer out in 35 mil. So that was good. Cartier Santos is now in a quartz with in a small model. It looked quite small. I saw it in steel and yellow metal and 18 karat yellow gold. So that will be good. And I guess the big one really was Patek's Cubitus, now coming out as a 40 mil. That seemed to be the criticism, the commentary, whatever words you use to choose, about the 45 mil that came out last sort of October, I think it was. October, yeah. I think it was. So it's 45 mil, it's too big. So it's now 40 mil. So whether they got that in the pipe or whether it was a reaction to people saying 45 is too big, but it looked really great as a rose gold model with a brownie dial. and a white gold model with a blue dial. Looked great. It wore really well. Can't fail. I mean, I think people generally think that 40 mil is maybe the right size for it, but it looked really good anyway. No problems with that at all. And there was
no problems. Excellent.
yeah,
I'll be
yeah,
really pleased.
yeah. There you go. Yeah, I mean, rubber stamping Patek watches, like yeah, like that seal of approval makes no difference at all. But it's important to have opinions, isn't it? And I guess the other thing that I noticed was there was quite a few gold bracelet watches around. So again, we can talk about the engineer being 40 or 35 mil in rose gold. I think it's like 40,000 pounds with a black dial in 40 and 32 in with a kind of champagne silver dial at 35 mil. He got the Rolex 1908 with their Setimo 7-link bracelet, which was really cool. And
yellow gold, because they'd not done it in yellow.
Yeah, that's right.
Since they launched
the
it in
1908
platinum,
was
white gold.
And then the one I loved was the Jaeger Reverso on a mesh bracelet for about 38,000 pounds. It looked great. It looked really great.
Well, the Tribute's actually my favourite watch anyway, and they'd done it on the Tribute. So I've loved a Milanese bracelet for a long time. So I wasn't sure about it when we first saw it, but it is beautiful.
Yeah.
You were right to be stunned by it initially for some reason, and I don't know why, because every component of that watch is exactly what I love.
Mm-hmm.
And just initially it didn't, but more for me. What do I know? So it was great. It was great. And I suppose Bulgari with they changed their bracelet a little bit on the Serpenti.
All right.
It was much more of a bangle clasp.
Mm-hmm.
They defined it. It looks very different to their other models. And you talked me through the inspiration behind the bracelets before and where they came from. It's in Italian.
Well, they call. I mean, the on the Serpenti, it's called tubo gas, and it was inspired by the gas pipes in Rome from the 1950s, I think it was. That were kind of like a tubular construction. So you've got these beautiful pieces of jewelry, even when they're in steel. I mean, Bulgari Serpenti is a beautiful watch, taking inspiration from a gas pipe. And then the engineering to make that spiral, the wraparound thing, and then put the metal around it. It's quite something. I mean, I do love Bulgari Serpentis. Wouldn't suit me, but I think, they're really good.
Yeah, and they've moved away from that. So, they've got another collection too, because it wasn't really sure how they were going to reinvent reinvent it. But that was, I suppose, I just sort of adding in a comment on your gold bracelet element, because it was a gold bracelet actually, not.
Yeah.
So, and we haven't. I mean, it's not the bracelet element, but one thing we didn't talk about was Big Bang. It was their anniversary. They came down some. That's completely sort of off topic actually, but I just remembered they. And more refined collection. I was very happy with that, because often we get to but some of the box collections they were launching this year in excess of £1 million, because they were doing all the movements, tourbillons, Mecha 10s, and all of that.
Well, I mean, again, age is a wonderful thing, because getting old is better than the alternative, i.e., dying. But I remember I was working at Theo Fennell at the time, and we had half of the watch concession in Harrods, and the chap from Hublot came to see me and say, "We've got this new watch. It's called the Big Bang. And was it a 301 SB 1301 RX or something? The sort of steel fusion watchmaking, the combination of steel and rubber, and that was 20 years ago. So that sort of dates me quite a bit. But I mean, it was amazing. It was just amazing, and it's still amazing today. And it's amazing after 20 years I'm still talking about it. But there we go. One of those things. And incredible watch.
Yeah, it was good. And again, we had lucky enough to get an interview with their UK brand director, and
So
chief
product
of
guy.
product as well. So, and he was working on this collection. So excited to see those come out. I'm really grateful for their time. Speaking of time, we are running out. We are running out. But I would like to know your highlights of the fair and your 3 favourite watches, please.
Might have more than 3 highlights of the fair. I loved the Doxa 250T GMT with a turquoise dial. I think it's perfect for holidays. Great for diving in and telling the time back home. So that was cool. We haven't really mentioned Tudor, but I liked the Black Bay 58 with that sort of burgundy pomegranate red, whatever colour we call it, dial, sort of 39 mil, 11.7 mil thick, for 3.8, I think, 3,820 pounds, on the flat link bracelet anyway, which is always my favourite. It's they've dropped the COSC certification. It's now METAS, so it says Master Chronometer on the dial. 65 hours power reserve. Great watch, lovely, really eye catching, and a lovely colour too. I love the Patek 5370R. As we mentioned, that sort of split seconds chronograph with the Grand Fur enamel dial in brown with the sort of beigey subdials and chapter ring. That was really good. But I suppose, well, not I suppose, regretfully, I think the thing that probably has occupied most of the commentary from everybody is the Land Dweller. And aside from the movement, kind of how it looks, I think you referenced it's sort of loosely based on the oyster quartz. And I think the thing is that the fashion for watches over the last, I don't know, 50 years perhaps, has been an integrated steel sports watch. Started off by the Royal Oak, followed by the Nautilus, followed by the Girard-Perregaux Laureato. And the thing that unites those watches is the fact that the case and the bracelet are integrated. There's a bezel on there which has some presence by its shape and the importance it places in framing the dial. And then there's always something going on the dial. So you've got the tapisserie effect on the APs. You've got the lines on the Nautilus. You've got the kind of square stipple thing going on with the Girard Laureato. And so if you've got a tick box of what are the things for an integrated steel sports watch, the Land Dweller has all of those. The case and bracelet fit together nicely. It's got obviously the bezel of all bezels. The fluted bezel from Rolex is iconic. So it ticks all those boxes. You've already said it's in white roller saw, 18 karat, and there's a platinum version. It's on the 40 mil, for example. It's got 60 flutes on the bezel, which I think a normal day date, if there is such a thing, a day date has 72. So there's been some thought going into how that looks, and I think maybe all that plays to the kind of the accuracy of the watch. So I don't know whether 60 peaks on the bezel, 60 seconds on or 60 minutes rather on the actual dial. But there are 10 little lines between each 5-minute indices, rather than just 5 for a second. There's 10, which again, I mean, I may be overthinking this, but kind of implies the accuracy and plays to that 10 movements per second of the seconds hand. And I thought it was just incredible. Which I liked it actually.
Yeah, I can tell from
Yeah.
from the synopsis, but no,
Yeah,
it was great. So what was it? Well, you've got 15 seconds for your final. What was your favourite moment of the fair? It can be a watch or a moment.
I think it was the Land Dweller. Well, I think the Land Dweller. I mean, that's it. That's it. Everything. It was a great fair.
Yeah.
That was probably the greatest.
Yep.
Yeah, I think overall the most significant moment, significant event, significant watch at the fair was the Land Dweller. I mean, its current iterations are going to be evolved, but that was a 40mm Land Dweller. End of. It's going to be what Rolex evolve over the next number of years. Fantastic. Happy to see that. Amazing.
Okay. Thank you. I think my standout, I've already covered the UN Diver Air and the Reverso Tribute, but I also loved the 7010G from Patek. That was a beautiful watch on the wrist. But for me, just as much about the watches, it was about the experience. We meeting the gentleman from Rolex, and the engineers that you'd never really get the opportunity to, particularly in that in an environment outside of the manufacturer, and randomly having dinner with a screenwriter of a kung fu movie that's got cult status. So we are there as watch lovers, but it's the people that we meet along the way that just make the whole thing wonderful. That's all I've got. Mark, thank you so much. It was brilliant to take this trip with you. I hope we're there next year. Thanks for your time.